Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Eastern Essex District Department of Veteran Services. We're meeting here in the Ipswich Town Hall. At this point, I call the meeting to order. And first, we have citizens inquiry. Anybody who would say anything at this point? If not, we will move on to number 2. And we are being broadcast by ICAM, correct? Okay, so video and audio recordings by ICAM, that's the Ipswich Community Media. Okay, moving on, number 2, presentation of annual supporting those who have served. And this is the first annual award. And Doug Elwood. Doug is a fine young man and it's a great candidate chosen for this first award. I know Doug. Doug is from Raleigh. And I gave a presentation at the Raleigh Library. I'm going to embarrass you now.
I've heard you tell the story more than once. What's one more?
What's one more? And I gave a presentation on Normandy. And Doug was probably about 8-10 years old, something like that. And I went over and I shook his hand and they said, "Well, I'm glad you came here tonight. What do you wish to do when you grow up?" And he said, "Work for the State Department." Well, here's a young man that really knows where he's going at a young age. So it is a pleasure to have you here tonight and everybody else in this. We're going to do. Yeah, sure. You go right ahead, Karen.
All right, so come up, stand with me here. Actually, if somebody want to roll it so you can sit over here.
There we go.
All right, so I've known Doug for a couple of years now. He's come into my office asking, what can I do for veterans? I want to do something. And so I think the first year I mentioned about doing sock drive, because veterans are always in need. Socks, homeless veterans, they use socks for a lot more than just, wearing on their feet. In the military, we have a saying, you need to go change your socks. It means you have to, recharge and go out and, try to do the best you can and move forward. So the first time he did the sock drive, he got over 1,300 pairs of socks. Yeah. So, and we took those to VNOC, which is the Veterans Northeast Outreach Center. The second time he collected socks, he got over 500 pairs of socks. And he actually apologized for, only getting 500, and so again, outstanding. I just have to say that anytime anything has ever come up in regards to any events, any ceremonies that I've done, you're the first one that's there saying, can I help? What can I do? Do you, what is it that I can contribute? And, every time I was like, all right, if you can just be there and, be ready to go if we need something, you were already on point. You also, so if you guys didn't know this, during the pandemic, he came and did a Memorial Day recording. He brought 2 people with him. He brought a bugler to play taps. He brought another student to do the Missing Man table ceremony. And again, he was the MC. He gave speeches, and your professionalism is way beyond your years. Another thing that he did is he was at our Global War on Terror Memorial Bridge ceremony. He was out front, greeting people as they walked in the door. If they had a place to be sat, you were there to show them the way. But the most impressive thing is what you did this year, with the, November 10th, with the POW MIA, stadium chair ceremony. All right, so you guys need to know this. So Donnie, came up with the idea, to get a stadium chair at Triton Regional School. And something that he had mentioned to the superintendent. Superintendent was completely on board with like, yeah, let's do this. Dawn asked, oh, well, it's important to get students involved, students need to learn about this. Students need to be engaged. And I said, I got the student for you. I contacted Doug. Doug met with us one time and that was it. He had his notebook and he's like, oh, what were you thinking? We're like, oh, the national anthem, poems, speeches and stuff, just kind of, very vague, threw things out there. And he took it, and you could see the wheels in his head start churning. He was like, I got a person for this. Oh, I think we can do this. This might be a good idea. And I heard even your principal set aside time for you to meet with them to see how things were going, if he needed any guidance. And the principal was like, every time he walked in, he was like, I got this, and walked out, There is nobody I trust more to work with in regards to doing a ceremony or event, because I have full confidence that, if something needs to be done, that you'll do it. I don't need to check up on you. It's never a question of whether or not it's going to get done. And so that's just so incredibly important. I've done events with adults that I've had to check up on, and I don't have to do that with you. He did everything for this ceremony. Was one of the best ceremonies I've gone to. He did everything soup to nuts, between getting the kids involved, picking out people to sing, to read speeches, to read poems. He talked to his teachers that had to get the microphones and the, speakers and stage and all of that. And so, again, he did everything. We showed up and it was ready to go. So, and he was the MC. I gotta say, I would have been a nervous wreck. So the superintendent dismissed both the middle school and the high school. There were over 1,000 students in the stadium. All eyes on you, all eyes on the stage, all eyes on your peers, and I mean, the way that you handled it was absolutely astounding. You're way beyond your years. And so everything went flawless, and it was just one of the most beautiful things. You could hear a pin drop. The students in the stadium, no one was talking, nobody was on their phones, they were completely engaged. And the fact that it was completely student run and student, driven was like the most important thing, because, we might know what a POW MIA chair is, but these students don't. Like, this was such a learning experience for them. Now they know what this chair is, what it symbolizes, why we have it, why you put it at your school. And I have confidence that if somebody was to try to sit in that chair, I believe any one of those students would say, no, you can't sit here. There's a reason why we have this chair. We have this chair, and it is for, POW, MIAs, to symbolize people who aren't able to go to their children's, sports games, whether it's, football or track or whatnot. And so you were able to convey that and get that across to everyone so beautifully. He did receive a citation from Senator Tarr that day. Again, Senator Tarr, he's like, hey, I got something. And you were like, dude, why are you interrupting my ceremony here? And, and so the words that he had to say to you is completely echo what I feel and what I say about you. So, in the way that the ceremony ended, all the students, so this was the end of the day on a 3-day weekend, all right? So you figure, these kids, middle school, high school kids, they're gonna be like hooting and hollering, like, throwing confetti and like trying to get out of here. Instead, the students came down and they congratulated you, shook your hand, told you how, you did a great job, told the other students that were involved in the ceremony how great they did. I mean, it was like an extension of the ceremony, the way that the kids behaved on the field afterwards. They were taking pictures, they were looking at the chair. They heard one of their teachers, who is a Marine Corps vet. They had teachers who served, unveil the stadium chair. I mean, it was all good. I don't know that it could have been done better. So I'm your biggest fan. And I also would like to mention that, if there's anything that I can do for you in regards to recommendations or making phone calls, I know, Congressman Moulton, he does, nominations and stuff for people going into military academies, if that's something that that you want to do, but whatever it is, you have my total support. So with that being said, this year is the first year that we're going to be doing this, and your name is going to be the first name on the plaque. So we are going to, every year, so this is going to be new for our district, supporting those who have served. It's an annual award for unseen aiding and assistance veterans in our community, presented to Douglas Alward, Triton High School, 2022. You do not have the plaque, but you can, but you can have it. All right. And you also have the, support of the board. Doug, do you have anything you want to say?
Oh, sure. One of my other responsibilities is that I'm the commander of the American Legion in Georgetown. Renee J. Gagnon, Post 211. And I had Karen had spoken with me. We had a meeting last Thursday, and we voted to sponsor you to the American Legion Boys State, which is a leadership course. I believe it's at Bridgewater State College, and that will be sometime during the summer, I think in June, for the summer. This will help you in developing leadership, more leadership abilities, and also will look good on a resume. So we thank you very much for what you've done.
And if I can get the board of directors up here, assuming that you guys agree with me, I would love to get a nice picture with Doug. Thinking that I'll stick that up here.
Yeah, come on.
Yeah.
Oh, blend in, smile, everyone. Karen, you want to take a picture?
Yeah.
And then.
I'm trying to find it.
There we go.
You guys, was this a better angle? There,
Thank you.
excellent.
Oh, that's good.
All right.
That'll be good.
It is on YouTube, and like literally, it's amazing.
Great parents. Great parents. Great parents. Great job. Great job.
Thank you, very good.
It is on YouTube.
I'm sorry.
The ceremony, he does like.
Oh, really?
Like mesmerizing. Yeah.
He does the hard part.
West Newbury, yes, thank you.
Thank you very much. Keep trying to control what we do that. Thank you very much. We're going up, we're going to be this year. Gillette?
yeah.
Yeah, Gillette.
Oh, it's the,
23.
my dad's.
That's that. If you don't wish to stay, it looks, it's okay.
Yeah, we're gonna go into the warrant.
Yeah, well, quite a bit of work stuff.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank
you.
Thank you. Thanks for going. Have a nice night, everyone. Thank you. Thanks for so much. Very nice.
Yeah.
Other. If you really want to see something, it's to see Doug up at Triton that day as a presentation. I watched it. I watched it and I was like, this young man is, it is really, he's just so confident, so sure of himself. And it's something to watch and make you proud to be in America here, really. Fine young man. So moving on to number 3, presentation of additional tax exemption, chapter 59, section 5C1/2, Maryville Island, principal assessor, town of Ipswich, and Maureen Curtin, West Newbury Assessor's Office. So we can give us a presentation on this, and give us a little background. So with that,
I'm Mary Ryan, I'm the assessor here at Ipswich, Warren, clerk in West Newbury. I've been in another community that has adopted 5C1/2. This is something that, the state allows if the town decides to adopt it, that would, give every veteran in any statutory exemption. It includes everybody, so that means seniors and blind and anything that we give exemptions to, anybody that we give exemptions to, you can then double the exemption. It's up to double. The confusing part is they cannot pay less than they paid the year before. So what it would do is try to stabilize their taxes. So it's something that I'm been trying to figure out for 2 years here to do, but put on the back burner, unfortunately. And so I talked to the town manager briefly. Tomorrow I'll explain a little bit more to him. Then I'm going to present to the select board, the finance committee, and we have to present an article at town hall, at the town meeting, annual town meeting, and they vote on whether they would like to adopt this or not. So there's 130 folks who get exemptions here, at least this year. 89 of them are veterans. The others are seniors and blind combination. So it's not it's not like it's going to wipe out their taxes, but any little bit helps. And so if it's a $400 exemption, they can get up to $800 instead off of their taxes. So we have I put together a spreadsheet, which Maureen does as well, and it takes your last year's taxes, and your this year's taxes, you figure out what the it would be without the exemption, apply an exemption, and then you can do up to double, and you have to make sure that it's not less than what they paid for last year's taxes. So it gets a little complicated in the formula, but once you get them set up, it's not that much of a problem. So we're hoping to get all the support that we can for this. The caveat to this and why anybody might object to it in terms of anybody being the finance committee perhaps, or is, you only get reimbursed by the state for so many exemptions, a certain percent of the exemptions. So right now, across the board, let's say there's $160,000 worth of exemptions that we give out. The state is reimbursing approximately 50% of those. If we adopt 5C1/2 to do the up to double, you don't get reimbursed for anything more than what you already have been getting reimbursed for. So it's on the town, it's an expense to the town. I did a couple of, just some quick numbers for last year's versus this year's. And it's really around $6,500 difference in that, what it would cost us in terms of giving me up to double, but some of that is actually reimbursable, so it doesn't feel like that much of an expense to the town, but it all adds up. So to some people, maybe we can't give exact numbers because you don't know who's applying next year.
It changes every.
It does, it changes every year, so we'll be doing the best we can to, I'm going to do the presentation with Sheila from the Council on Aging, because it affects the seniors as well. So we're hoping that we get, I know Karen's on board, wants to support this, so I'm going to include her in whatever we do present. And anybody who can talk it up in the community, it's going to be great, because I think people need as much help as they can get. And it's near and dear to my heart because my youngest son was married for 5 years, and he's been out for a couple of years, but I imagine that anybody who serves their country, I feel like should be getting as much as they can in terms of a thank you. And it's really minor in comparison to what they've done, so that's kind of where it's at. If you can find a way to talk to people about letting it pass, that would be great.
I know that when we did it in our town, it was overwhelmingly passed. I don't think anybody even questioned it.
So I don't know what we're up against in terms of, because I haven't presented to the finance committee, and sometimes they like to know the details. So it gets a little tough if you can't give them exact numbers, which you can't. So,
And then
no, go ahead.
the qualification for a veteran would be a distiller.
Yeah, there's different types of veterans exemptions. Some of them are actually full. We have paraplegic ones. We have some that are 10% to 100%. So it depends on what you qualify for. And you just show up with your letter, and it tells about your disability, or the percent that you have disability.
And you only have to do that once.
Once.
So that-
And then how many seniors are there? We're just talking right now, just Ipswich.
Oh, how many are receiving exemption?
Yes.
So probably 15 or so.
Those qualifications are very hard to meet.
They're very steep.
Yeah.
Let's put it this way, you have to be
Just
really, really poor, and that the state has not come up to speed with the cost of living for folks on fixed income.
We only have 4 in Westonbury. That's all.
And then the number of seniors, and then, not number of veterans is
89, you're
89.
receiving it right now.
And the exemption right now is $400.
For that particular, right, that's the lowest.
The 22, right, and then it goes.
Karen has the chart
Yeah.
with the Gold Star families are included.
Yeah.
There's a
Yeah.
whole myriad of
Right.
folks
Some
that
of
are
them are-
included.
Yeah.
And the good news is, I'm Dana Packer from the town of Newbury. I've moved this forward in the town of Newbury already. It's gone through the whole process, and it's gonna be on our annual town meeting. Our citizens are already gonna vote on it. And we're gonna attempt to double it, like what you said,
Yeah.
so. And, the last board meeting we had, I would like to move forward we were talking about this group sending a letter to the state officials trying to increase the amount that the state reimburses us, because I think that that's very important, you know, not only to support our veterans, but to show the people that the state is behind this also. So I don't know how far that has gotten or where that's going, or.
It's been so long since we had our last meeting, you know, we meet quarterly here. We didn't, well, last time I did on minutes on a letter to send to the state. I don't think we did.
But we talked about it right at the end of the meeting,
Yes.
at the end of the meeting, so I think that's important also.
Yeah, I think it's important to talk to our state representatives, and our state senator.
Yeah, and I talked to Lenny and Bruce Tower about this, and like, I'm not a big politician guy, but I guess right now, between now and the beginning of next year would be the time to write up new legislation to present it for the next fiscal year for the state. So I'm gonna continue to push that. And I think a letter from this group would also help that a lot.
I think it would. How's the board feel about that?
Oh, I'm good.
I'm gonna, please continue.
Yeah, I'm
No,
sorry.
I don't really, I mean, I'm just hoping for your support and that for, you know, I can't give you, this isn't a final presentation, but, it's just to explain to folks what the effects of this would be. The only downfall to it is that you don't get fully reimbursed now for, well, you don't get fully reimbursed for much, but you don't get any additional reimbursements from the state. But again, it's really not that much money, you know, in the budget. But folks could object, you know,
Oh, it's not a meeting and
Yep.
people
Yep.
can speak up.
I would, you know, I mean, most communities have had the support. So, I don't know of anybody who's not got past the
I
trial.
haven't heard of anybody.
So,
Is there a list of communities that have adopted?
so I reached out to the state to ask that, and they sent me a report that it wasn't on. I said, no,
We weren't even on it.
I've seen that report and it's not, you know, and so she said, well, I'll go look and see if I can find something. And she sent me a list of like, I don't know, 8 towns or something like that. And Chelsea wasn't on it, and that's where I used to work, and they adopted it. And I know we sent the information in from the clerk to tell them we adopted it. They weren't on the list either. West Newbury wasn't on, and they've adopted it, so they don't have a list.
I think it's hard too, that the word doesn't get out there easily to the towns about what is offered.
Right.
It's kind of word of mouth. Oh, do you do this? Oh, I didn't hear of it, you know, unfortunately.
Yeah, and you know, as an assessor coming in here, the only reason I knew about it and wanted to present it is because I had it in my local community that I was in. So, and we all know that even the exemptions they do give aren't enough. So along with that letter too about reimbursements, it's really about increasing the amounts they give to begin with. I feel like, you know, all of us are heading for that aging place where if you're on a fixed income, it's very difficult, and the criteria to qualify for these in terms of the seniors is so low, it's horrific. So I feel like they should just revamp the whole program and up these, you know, to help more people. But that again is legislature, so we have to start moving through that home.
When was this introduced into the towns? The $400, right?
Oh, I thought you meant the increase.
Oh, exemptions for
The increase was 1988 to double
1988.
it.
So
to
that,
do the up to double.
so 1988, it was $400.
No, it was 400 prior to that even.
Prior to that.
We're talking about the increase was in 1998, right? Yeah.
98.
98 or 88.
I think it started in 88.
Yeah. That's when they passed the legislation that allows the town to increase it on their own. But the reimbursement's been there for As long as I've been alive.
The point I'm trying to make is that it's something that was about $400 back.
Exactly.
And so now, a person's taxes back at that particular time will probably, you know, if somebody have, so I mean, I think most communities around here, if you have a medium-sized home, you're paying around $8,000 a year.
Correct.
Okay, so you can see probably back 20 years ago, 30 years ago, your tax bill of $8,000.
Percentage wise, it was
Probably
a
around
lot better.
$2,500. So $400 was a sizable, you know, dent in your taxes. So there hasn't been anything put forward in all that. So, I think that's the best way I can explain it, you know, inflation, and, you know, it's the last 30 years, especially when it comes to taxes, everybody knows, especially property taxes. Quite a chunk of it. Marty, do you have anything to add?
No, I'm just here to support Mary Lou then, for any other questions. The only thing we do, and I don't know if you guys have, we, in 2016 locally adopted to lower the residency requirement from 5 years to 1 year. Did you guys just already do that? That wasn't just another thing I was gonna throw in.
So it's currently 5 years?
So have any more questions from the board members?
Yeah, Mary Lou, just for people that might be watching, we're talking only about real estate taxes, right? So these are property owners.
Yes,
So it wouldn't apply.
you have to own and occupy.
Okay.
It has to be your domicile, actually.
So there's no, benefit for somebody who, might be a veteran who is renting. And the veterans benefit exemption only applies for disabled veterans.
Yes, that they have to have a percent disability, so I don't know, I'm not well versed on how those levels come and what your requirements to get 10% disability.
Or just give you your percentage and
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how strict they are giving it to you, like, you have to prove or.
we
Yeah,
have to
no.
fill out a form every year.
Yeah.
Yeah, they have access to the records of the ASIN, but anyway, say what your exemption or your service connected rating is.
What I was getting at was though that, a low income veteran has no physical disability wouldn't qualify for that exemption.
No, not unless they qualify for, based on income for the senior at age 65.
Right, but they wouldn't get the veterans piece of it.
I think it's probably time for increase.
Oh, yeah. And, I mean, I'm surprised to find out that this clause has been around for so many years. And I know I've asked in the legislature several times. They say, we don't know of anything. So, it's a matter of what it is. So you just find out and we try to move forward. I think it's a good thing. And I know that I had talked to Dana about it, and I had actually given an idea to Senator Tarr and our Representative Linda Mira. So, like you graduated once, just an example. I don't know how they want to do it, just that it hasn't been increased. And to give you an example, my package was $1,100 in 1988. So a $400 exemption in a year is huge.
Yes.
Now there's 6 of them.
Yeah.
So,
Any other questions from board members?
So if you're at the 100% disabled with the fully service connected permanent, that's $1,000 a year. So are we saying that it's now 2,000 a year?
Up to.
up to
So what brings it to that 2,000? So am I,
How much your taxes go up.
okay,
Right, so when I did this exercise, sorry.
Yeah, no.
So I did a comparison of last year's to this,
Right.
21 to 22, all right, fiscal years. Because the 23 values went up. And taxes actually went down, so it wasn't gonna benefit anybody, so I waited till this year's because the taxes are going up, I'm sorry to say. But that's when it matters, that someone's taxes went up $1,000. So you might be able, they might get the full 2,000. There is somebody in here who's gonna, will get the full 2,000.
So you first move into the town, and then you have your residency, and then you have to wait that July, right? 1 July is the date we.
You have to wait a
Wait,
full
wait,
fiscal
wait,
year.
full physical year, and then you have your taxes from that first year. And then you get the full amount if you're 100% permanent, that you get that. You get that 1,000, but it won't increase to 1,100, 1,200, 1,300 unless your taxes go up from the first initial tax base. Okay.
I heard a rumor, don't know if it's true, that Linfield adopted automatic double. I don't know if that's even legal or not, but
I've not,
yeah.
that's.
When you pay Linfield property taxes, that's nothing. Yeah. Okay.
Right, anything else? Karen, do you have anything, Mr. Director?
Well, you can see why I brought them on. Brought them to the meeting. Thank you so much. Because otherwise, yeah, it would be blind leading the blind here. But yeah, like Mary said, and I did contact all the assessors within the district to confirm whether or not they had it. To let them know this is what, you know, we were thinking, and, you know, make sure that they were on board. And I do plan on reaching out to the COA directors, because I want to do, you know, because I approached Mary Lou and Sheila approached Mary Lou, and I was like, oh, wait a second, why are we doing this? Like, let's collaborate and, you know, hit the town all together. So I'm going to, you know, I guess with you guys' permission, I don't know if I have to ask that, but I'm gonna talk to the other COA directors to see if they wanna, you know, get together and approach the town.
I just want to clarify something, at least from what I know. Let's say you're gonna double it, you vote to double it, and at the annual town meeting, the town approves the double. It doesn't necessarily mean that each person's property tax is gonna go up by that amount. I talked to my town administrator, and to get this rolling, we're gonna absorb it. Well, like the town of Newbury is like, I'm just throwing these numbers out here. Let's say it's gonna cost us $45,000 to double the exemption that these folks are gonna get. We're gonna absorb that amount and work it into our budget. And in other words, it's not gonna affect like Proposition 2.5 or you know, the amount that an individual's taxes is gonna go up, because Newbury's kind of fortunate that we've got some extra cash floating around, and we're gonna be able to do this without necessarily raising taxes. So it's not an automatic property tax raise to the citizen if this gets passed. It may be, you know, it depends, you know, you're an assessor, you know, you would know, and it might be, but it doesn't necessarily mean that.
Right.
Comes out of the overlay, right? It does, yes.
Comes out of what they,
The overlay,
But
but the overlay affects us.
I think what you wanted to write to the state senators is different than what is being done. I mean, I live in West Newbury. She does a phenomenal job. And that's how I met her. I mean, she takes great care of us, hands down. Very extremely well taken care of. But it really does. We would have to write it differently than the town does, because it's predicated upon your taxes increasing. What I was always hearing was that in the state of Massachusetts, because every state is different. So when I retired, it was every state is completely different. Some states it's completely tax exempt up to the first 100,000 and so on. Massachusetts had $1,000. If you were 100% disabled, permanent, service related, it was $1,000. So I lived in Plymouth. I got my $1,000. Came to West Newbury, I had to waive my residency after we built the house, and she took great care of us, processed my paperwork, and yeah, I was very well taken care of. But that doesn't mean that I'm gonna get $2,000 now, and that's how I was taking it. I was taking it as, if you look at the different numbers, there's different categories for your compensation based on your disability, whether 100% or 50 or whatever it is. So if we were writing this letter, the way I would be approaching this here is that it doesn't matter if your taxes go up or down or whatever. If we want it to be double than what it was based on the cost of living expenses and how everything else is going, I'd be looking for $2,000 right off the bat. As soon as I go back into my town and I give her my paperwork before 1 December, I'm looking to get $2,000 off of my taxes, vices $1,000. But that's not what we're truly saying. That's not what's technically being done. It is based upon, I got $1,000 because I moved to West Newbury in 2019. I'm gonna get $1,000 until they continue to raise my tax. I guess when I get to a certain tax level, like my taxes go up even higher, then I might get 1,100 or 1,200 or 1,300. So what would actually move the meter to get up to that $2,000?
So if your taxes went up $1,000 from last year to this year, you'd get.
Got
the
it.
extra
Okay, all
1,000.
right,
If
so-
it went up 899, you'd get
Got it.
1,899.
Okay, that, I completely understand that. That's great. But if you were writing this to the senators, I'd be writing that we want to double everything for everything. So if you're at 20% and you get $200 off your taxes, we want the new base level to start at 400. We want the next base level to start at 800 and then $2,000.
Well, how I understand this is that we get a reimbursement from the state.
Right, the state is basing it upon how it's written in the law right now, which is $1,000. That's how it's, when you read, like you're coming to live in the state of Massachusetts, you can look up the law and it shows you what my compensation is gonna be at whatever I'm rated
The
as.
state is not compensating that.
The state says, no matter where I move to in Massachusetts, I'm gonna get $1,000 off on my taxes a year, whether the town, the city, whatever has any kind of rule, it doesn't
They
matter.
don't compensate.
Can I add to this? You're exactly right. In the letter that we want to write to the state, this is my opinion, the letter that we want to write to the state is to increase the reimbursement.
Absolutely.
Okay, but hang on. Well, I don't think what we want to do is have the state mandate a higher rate. I wouldn't want to see that happen. In other words, let's say the max is $400 if you're 10% disabled, which is what it is. I don't want the state to mandate that every town has to then increase that to 800. What I want the state to do is I want them to increase the reimbursement to the towns for that amount of money and allow the towns to make their individual assessments on whether they want to personally increase it or not. That's what I would prefer to see.
But if, as a veteran with knowing what the cost of living is in a particular state, Massachusetts, I don't want to say it's a disgrace, but it is horrible and for a retiree to retire in the state of Massachusetts for that specific purpose. And you can go to Washington, D.C., Virginia, Florida. There are some states that they charge the veterans who are 100% disabled, permanent, service-related, zero taxes. And I'm not saying, and I agree with that, but Massachusetts is a very expensive state. If you really want to take care of a veteran, my personal opinion, you need to give them guaranteed more money off on their taxes. That's how I would look at it. And of course, give the reimbursements back to the towns, but the veterans really need more, to be very honest with you. I mean, if I were writing it, I would write it, change everything to 2,000, double it. If that's what we were saying, that's how I would write the letter. That's all I'm saying for that. Again, my town takes great care of me, so.
It's almost too bad that it's not a statewide program and that property taxpayers should get a tax credit on their state tax returns rather than make it, up to the individual cities and towns. For instance, you said you moved up here from Plymouth
When I retired, we retired in
and you
Plymouth.
came up here and then you had to wait a year to get your residency to qualify in that town
Correct.
that you're in, right?
The only reason that was is because when I lived in Plymouth, I got my tax exemption there and it technically rose over. You can't get tax exemption from two cities or two towns simultaneously.
Right, I understand.
So we got ours. We were taken care of by the city of Plymouth. I think I lost maybe 6 months, but again, it was the timing of our moving and everything, and they processed the paperwork as soon as it was given to them, but I could only process it during the time frame that all the towns and cities have, which is state, that's the same state date, so that's
Yeah,
why.
no,
it
I'm
was.
just suggesting that, it's too bad that it's not done on a statewide level rather than, so that you, for
Yeah, I
example,
see what
would
you're
file
saying.
your state income tax return, attach your property tax bill, and you get a
Yeah.
credit at that level for it.
But the problem is that being retired military, Massachusetts does not tax my pension. Because I'm retired and I came on active duty in the state of Massachusetts when I came on active duty.
Yeah, but I mean, that even aside, if you are a veteran, no matter where you lived then, and you have your retirement paperwork, and you now live in Massachusetts or wherever it is, and you show that retirement paperwork in your tax bill, it's just an idea, as opposed to each individual town having to create.
I follow Linda's logic because this is a very complicated
Yeah.
procedure to go forward
Well,
with.
it
And
is.
it
And
is.
you moved, and if someone has to move because of family circumstances or finances or life
They
thing.
just want to retire in Massachusetts.
Well, when I'm saying moving from Plymouth to, anyway, that whatever your reasons are, you're not getting that break.
As Linda said, it would be so much easier if they kind of, put it right across the state. And then, every town would have to sit there and go, figure out a formula about how do we treat this veteran who has 10%, 20%, or 30%. It would be, if it was statewide, I think that's the way we wanna.
They've actually attempted, a lot of legislation has been written to increase let's just say the $1,000 to $2,000, and it hasn't passed for like 10 years.
Yeah.
Every year it gets presented,
No,
and every year it gets shut down. And I just want to add that it's not just retirements we're talking about. I mean, you can be a Marine and you could have served and, been disabled in Afghanistan and only been there for 1 year, and you're just a veteran, you're still gonna get this exemption. It's not just retirees.
Right.
Well, yeah,
Yeah,
no,
I get that.
100%.
Yeah.
It's all veterans.
I think right now we need to put a letter together, how to word this. I'm looking at you, Linda. She's great at writing letters. But we need to put something together as a board, and what are the points that we wish to put into the letter?
What are the points? Is that a question?
We're bullet points, and we're gonna put bullet points, and then we'll need to craft a letter around that.
Well, I mean, I'm of the opinion with the rest of my colleagues here that have talked about military. And that right now, you get $400 whether you're 10% or 90%. And you get $1,000 if you're 100%. That those numbers need to change. Going
There
forward.
needs to be, and I think a letter needs to be crafted, talking about this was first introduced in 1988, and there has been no increase since 1988, at $400. And since then, property taxes have gone up so-and-so percentage, and, the veteran has been left behind at this point. Can you, as state legislator or state senator, please introduce something to the general court to give relief?
But if they force, let's say we go from 1,000 to 2,000, and that legislation passes, and they force the towns to go from 1,000 to 2,000, if they don't increase the reimbursement,
That's right.
that's the big key, is we need to get the
That
reimbursement.
needs to be crafted. in the letter.
Right.
So, so I think we need to take the points from tonight, and I don't think we can do this. Probably need to do this between now and the next meeting, craft a letter, and do I have support from the board to craft the letter?
Well, point of clarification. I believe you were talking about this chapter 59, or the clause 5C.5.
Yes.
That was instituted in 1988, or whatever that was. I think that the reimbursement of 400, the exemption of 400 or 1,000 has been the number right from the beginning. I don't know that stuff.
Well, I don't want to put the burden on the towns either. You know, the state really needs to step forward and increase that number. It needs to increase reimburse each town. That I think that needs to be crafted in also. So.
Does this sheet correspond with?
No,
No.
that's something else.
Thank you.
All right.
So that'll-
Well, I don't want to keep you any longer. Marlene and Mary Lou, thank you so much for coming in and explaining. Exactly what you know.
We'll see you soon. Well, I got, yeah, I have to get on the schedule. Thank you.
Thank
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your explanation.
Thank you.
I think we need to vote on crafting a letter. Okay, this is not just, I guess. Crafting.
She's looking up at the phone.
Everywhere.
I was way out there too. So.
Is somebody leaving?
You're obviously talking.
We need to put these part letter and put the points that we spoke about tonight. Okay. And put it into some. And send it out to the board and we'll take a look at it. I don't think this is something that we can be written and put together in, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. I think it needs to be well thought out. And probably for the next meeting, and I think our next meeting probably should be in February. Yeah, budget season, coming up, and like every one of us, between February and March, we're running towards town meeting, so,
Tuesday's a bad night, but I'm missing a select board meeting tonight.
yes, you're right.
But this, to me, this is more important, so that's why I'm
Yeah,
here.
appreciate you
Well,
being,
maybe, a couple, maybe Dana and
Ron?
Ron could work together to craft something and send it to you. Well, because I think you
well,
guys
I mean,
understand it
you
better than
you brought up some good points, okay,
Yeah.
and,
maybe.
I think put some bullet points together, all right, and send them to Karen, okay, and then we'll disseminate them to board members, and we'll get.
We'll CC, well, I guess that would be a quorum, so we
Yeah,
can't
that's why
do
it's-
that. Yeah, you're right.
Send it to, so there's no violations of
Right.
the meeting law.
Sorry.
Send it to Karen, okay, well, no,
I'm kind of new at this.
yeah, right, I
Yeah.
understand. And we'll send it to Karen, then Karen can disseminate it to the board, okay? And then we can, just look at it, and then we come back to a meeting, and we're face to face, and then we can sit here and hash
And
it
bring
out,
our comments.
and put our comments together, and then we can move forward from there. And so we're gonna have a meeting probably in February, sometime around February, beginning of February, I would think. And,
Well, you need to do the budget.
hmm?
You need to do the budget
Yeah, we have
for
to do the
24.
budget too. Yeah, we have to, so that's something. So why don't we,
I can come in, Karen, I can come into your office and sit down with you, and we can I mean, that might work out a little better, hashing things out and, you know, if you want to, and we don't even have to do it all at the same time, because I know schedules are difficult, but, you're here, what are your hours here? You're here 5 days a week, or?
Mhm.
Yeah.
I work late on Mondays, I'm here till 7, and then half days on Friday.
I mean, I can drop in here anytime. I'm retired. I just, you know, I'm looking for things to do, you know, so.
We'll give them to you. All right. We're gonna move on from here, so, Dana, if you would.
Yeah, sure.
Just have the bullets out to, and then we'll move forward with it. All right, number 4 minutes, we have no minutes, so we're gonna table that. So that item, and now we're gonna move on to financials, and Karen Summit, our treasurer. Will you take it away?
Sure. So basically, everyone has the financial statements. We have our balance sheet, our budgets versus actuals and profit and loss. And we're plugging along as we should be. We're about 5 months through the year. And does anybody have any questions? I mean, there's nothing really terribly exciting going on. You know, there's nothing that we need to discuss because we're, you know, sufficiently.
How much of the budget have we used in 5 months?
So we basically have used, we've got 111,933.35 remaining, so about 55% of the budget. So we're right on track.
We're on track.
And there's not really any specific categories, you know, where we're significantly having issues. So you want to continue with the bullets?
Yes, let's go into the bullets now. And, I'm sorry.
So at the last meeting, we had discussed the surplus. And there was some discussion about, you know, whether that could go back to the towns in the form of a reimbursement as opposed to reducing assessments going forward. And Karen and I had a conversation with Jim Powers, and he said, yeah, that's something that we would definitely do. So basically, at the end of the last fiscal year, we have, it's roughly $60,000.
So that's the 59,962.
Yes. Yeah. Right, so it's roughly $60,000 that, you know, basically, if the board chooses to vote, what we would do is we would, you know, take that and divide it by assessments, so everyone would get the same proportions and send a check to the towns.
What feel about that?
I can make copies of this.
I guess, are there things for the veterans that we would want to do, vice versa, give it back to the town and let the town kind of do whatever they want with it? I mean, because wasn't it designated for veterans?
It's for the administration of this office, is what the town assessment is. It's for running this.
Okay, but, so I would just throw this out, just as something, is, let's just say that Essex wanted to get a vehicle to drive veterans to appointments, like they do I'll use the town of Peabody. They have a couple of vehicles, they have their veterans, they want to go to appointments, they do it. Haverhill has it, and I know a lot of them, some of us volunteer to go and drive them, to drive the veterans to the. Is there something that this money could be utilized for, that there's a need for the office to have that would better serve the veterans of Essex County?
Well, can you explain?
Unless I'm talking about something wrong.
Well, I mean, the point of this board, what that budget is it supports the running of this office.
And that's it.
Basically, every time, you know, it costs X amount of dollars to, you know, to run the district. And, you know, we vote on a budget.
Right.
So the budget has these lines. If you look on the budget, the profit and loss and the budgets, you know, this is what the board voted for last year. Was okay, you know, salaries, insurance, office supplies, blah, blah, blah. The policy in the past has been that if there's excess earnings, we don't spend all of our money, kind of the same thing as free cash in the town. We would like to keep a base of $50,000. Well, you know, we've spent less money, we've had some staffing things or whatever. We've now got a surplus of more than that. And at the last meeting, there was discussion about about, returning that to the towns.
And keeping that 50,000 or
Yeah.
whatever.
Right,
it is.
yes, definitely.
Because we did vote to maintain a $50,000,
Right,
a maximum in the retained earnings.
in the
So,
event of any emergency or something like that that's unexpected.
So is there, so for the, so like Karen's office, I just use it as an example. It's inside here, running of your office. So if there was something at the office, and again, I just throw that back out, needed a vehicle to drive veterans to appointments, would that be considered something part of this budget?
Not realistically with 1.5 people in the office. I mean, you don't have, it's not a realistic thing. I mean, Karen runs the office and then Karen is the other person. So, I mean, you're talking about a small operation.
It's not a service that their office provides,
Right.
so we wouldn't be.
Okay,
Giving
I
them
was just
equipment to-
asking if that was something that was plausible for what money could be used for, vice giving it back to the town. That's all. I was just asking if there was something else.
how would be the, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry,
Okay.
it was not part of a budget for any special project.
Yeah,
or
this
anything
is,
like that.
this is like an overcharge.
This is, yeah, this is,
Right,
you're right, this
that's-
is be a general fund.
Right, so if,
So-
if in a town, if you overcharged, you would give money back to the taxpayer. So, am I,
Maybe like with the state.
No, we're not-
It's more like free cash.
Money back.
more like
Yeah.
free cash, okay. So it's, I guess, on the
That's
same
where it
level
lines
as the state, when the state had taken too much taxes. And
And they gave some back,
they
right?
gave it back.
Right.
So what we're basically doing is looking at this and saying, we have
Mhm.
$59,962. So by the number of veterans that you have in your town and the assessment,
It's by the number of people,
And then-
population.
population, I'm sorry. And so each town would get back a proportion of that. So the largest town would be Ipswich,
Yeah.
and they would get $19,461.
Correct.
Essex would get $5,068. Georgetown, $11,515 and change. Newbury, $9,198.24. Raleigh, $8,514.24. And West Newbury, $6,205.71, which adds up to $59,000. $962.
Did Mr. Powers?
Yep.
Okay. Did he say there was a downside to refunding the money that way versus reducing assessments?
Well, the issue with reducing assessments is if they go down, next year, they're gonna go up, 40% or something. And this just is a better way to, because you know what happens when assessments go up? People say, well, why did that go up? Why is this up 50%? Your finance committee says, well, it's.
My feeling is the best thing is to give the money back to the.
Right, and eventually, it'll flow through into free cash.
So,
Okay.
any.
So we would still have 50,000.
Yes,
In our free cash,
Yes.
even by giving back this
Yes.
59,000.
Right,
I got it.
okay,
Yeah.
so,
So do we need a vote? for this?
yes, we do. So do I have a motion to give back to the towns, retained earnings from the fund in proportion as Karen has on, the veteran services retained earnings refund, 2022.
So moved.
I have a motion. Do I have a-
I second.
I have a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right,
It passes unanimously. Good.
Thank
Okay.
you.
and just keep in mind, so what that, this is also from my conversation with Jim Howard. That is gonna show up on our financials as an expense.
Mhm.
So when we have negative net income of, $60,000 this year, that's why.
well, just remind us.
Yes,
Just remind us.
I'm telling you in advance.
Before we start asking.
Okay. Bullet number 2 on the financial, what does the board want to do about the financial review and audit? So Karen, again,
Okay,
treasurer, explain this to us.
so Karen and I had a conversation with Jim Powers.
Jim Powers is,
is the auditor from Powers and Sullivan. He's a partner there, and he is the one that Karen spoke to when she took over and helped set up all the financials. I don't know if any of your towns use Powers and Sullivan as auditors. Yeah, so, so he's a partner there. So, Karen and I had a conversation. We, set him up so he could look at, you know, the financials and QuickBooks. And this is, I'm gonna read you the email. Yeah. I reviewed the activity and budget for both fiscal year 21 and 22 in summary and reviewed all detailed revenues and expenses. Everything made sense and really, I really don't have any questions or concerns. The only thing that would change if we issued financial statements in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles would be that the donations revenue posted directly to equity would be part of the profit and loss statement. No big deal to leave it the way it is currently shown. Couple of ways to move forward depending on what the board wants. I can send a summary letter to the board on my findings based on the review of the QuickBooks file, pretty much stating what I said above. I will do this for no fee. As stated last year, if the board wants an audit, it will cost $2,500. And if they want to review, the cost would be about $1,500. The reason being that we would need to prepare full GAAP financial statements and notes to the financial statements, in addition to reporting your long-term liabilities for your proportionate share of Essex Regional Retirement, net pension liabilities, and the calculation of other post-employment benefit liabilities for retiree health insurance. I would not expect that there would be any management letter for improvements to the accounting process. There would be something on GAAP reporting if you wanted to continue issuing this type of report. From a practical standpoint, I don't see much value in that for a $220,000 operation. Let me know how you'd like to proceed.
okay, now, board's heard what Karen has said. Do I have any opinions from the board?
I have a question,
Okay.
because it seems that we have review / audit suggesting that it's kind of one and the same, but he has a different price tag on each one.
Right, so an audit, it has to do with the accounting principles and what they're required to report. Usually, I mean, towns get audited because they get federal money. There are certain requirements. You know, some smaller towns out in Western Mass don't even have audits. A review requires, you know, some of that, but not all of it, and that's the difference for the two prices.
So, for the board members, how do you feel about what Karen has
And
said?
what time a full audit is done?
Probably never. Because you know, an audit is a technical term.
Yeah.
And like you said, you know, for a small operation like this, you know, it's probably overkill.
But he would issue a letter. to
Yes,
us, Right, saying that he's reviewed.
Right.
The books.
So we would get a letter reviewing the financials.
Now, basically what he's gonna say is I've taken a look at the financials and everything seems in order. I mean, they're not that
Said that
complicated.
in the email.
Right,
What he said.
right. But he would, you know, basically issue
A
a
formal
letter. Yeah.
But I mean, would that be the 1,500?
No, that's free.
So that's, he's gonna do that
Yeah.
free of charge, right?
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Okay, so Karen, you're
Yeah.
a treasurer.
But you know what? It's my work that's being audited.
You
so
must
I
be
don't
doing a
want
great
to-
job,
yeah.
okay, thank you.
No, was it a testament to you?
That was, yes.
So, Mr. Chair, I prefer free.
Yeah.
How does the rest of the board feel?
I agree.
I mean, it's a small operation,
Right.
you know.
Right.
$250,000 overdue. Everything is right here.
Look
on
at
the
everything.
financials. I mean, you can go through this and you can see everything.
Right, and you know, if any, you know, the really nice thing about QuickBooks is if, you know, someone said, well, you know, I really want to know what's in this, you know, office expense line. You know, you just drill it down and, you know, here you go. I mean,
And, you
It's
know,
pretty
we sat at the table
transparent.
here and we picked at, you know, how much does it cost for components? How much does it cost for, you know, the copier? How much we know, I mean, it's a very small operation, so. All right, so with that, how does the board wish to go? Do we wish to go with an audit or just a letter of financial review?
I think I would make a motion that we request formal letter, that discussed, how
And defer, an
to
honor.
defer formal about it.
So I have a motion from the board. I have a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
It's unanimous. Thank you very much. Karen, wish to stay, you may, I don't think there's anything else that we have.
Okay.
Okay, all right.
Thank you.
Moving on to chairman's report. Wreaths across America, just, I'll talk briefly, wreaths across America. The wreaths came into Newbury. You got them.
I don't know what.
Yes,
Yes.
Newbury received them, Georgetown.
Georgetown received them.
Yes.
And Raleigh, came in Sunday, and about 20 plus people, almost like 25 people showed up, and we unloaded the race, and it was a nice group. Bob Breaker, you know Bob Breaker, he's what we call in Raleigh the chief of the boat. He used to be in the Coast Guard chief boat. He was running the forklift. He was taking the wreaths off the back of a truck. The people from Maine and the wreaths across America, it's so nice. And it was just a nice day. It was cold as heck out there. And we spent about 45 minutes, but everybody was moving along, and we kind of looked at full. So we all the wreaths, we got 700 wreaths in Raleigh unloaded. And I imagine the same thing.
Yeah, we have quite a lot.
Yeah, and you know, we put a letter out, to the town and told everybody to show up this Saturday at 10 o'clock in Raleigh to do it.
We're at 11.
You're at 11.
I gotta, it's on my calendar, I'm sure, but I'm not sure.
Okay. So, I mean, this is something, we've done the last couple of years, Wreaths Across America. It's a lot of fun to, wow, say fun. It's an honor to go out there. We have 700 graves and we'll go place them on. Some people have come into, and years ago, Bob Murray, who passed away a couple years ago in Raleigh, he was like Mr. Raleigh. I don't know if you know, but he was our town historian, and I went out there with Bob one time, and we found a grave of a fellow named Marr, and we placed it in a wreath on his grave. So we wanted to find out a little bit more on it. I love history, so I started digging, looking. Well, again, nobody had been to this grave, I would say, probably since 1947, when he was brought home. He was killed in the Battle of Bulge. He was killed Christmas Eve, 1944, in the Battle of Bulge, and I started going in. And during the Battle of Bulge, at this particular time, they sent out these combat teams trying to blunt the Germans. He got caught up in this. He was with his task force program. And I just kept picking away, trying to find, and I just found all this. He was killed. He was the only son. Everybody in his family moved away from Raleigh. It was devastating to his family. And as I picked away at this individual, and I just felt he'd been forgotten. And Bob's father escorted the body home to Raleigh. So it was there was meaning to so many stories out there in the cemetery that you don't realize that these vets. We have another vet that we placed a wreath on a couple of years before that, and Bob Murray found it. And he was shot down in the Solomons this fall, and his body wasn't found. The POW, MIA, body recovery, the dark or something, the name. And they found his remains on this island, and they repatriated and brought him home. Do you remember his name? It's like a real old Raleigh name, but he was a pilot, and I read about what happened to him. It just happened to him by any aircraft liner. And crashed at the island, and he was missing in action for up until 10 years ago. And yeah, so I think, Wreaths Across America, if anybody's looking to listen, listen at home and listen to this, if you can come out, you know, find out your local town, one of the towns, and find out what it is, and just, it's something to walk the cemetery and to find these veterans' graves. I think I mentioned before, when I was in Normandy, I've been in Normandy several times, and I walked Omaha Beach Cemetery. The bluff actually overlooks Omaha Beach, and the cemetery has 9,600 graves, and there's 1,300 or more MIAs that they have a memorial to. And many of these young men were killed not too far from where they're buried. You know, on Omaha. Anybody who was in the Normandy campaign was buried in that cemetery. So it's very moving, and it's, you know, every time to me, I love history. You walk the cemetery and you stop in front of a grave that says, "No, but God to God." Our remains did not go who was. There's no way of identifying the person. There's a whole story here. This story of somebody's life who never would be able to fulfill their life, civilian life, and they paid the ultimate cost. So this Saturday or Sunday, I don't know what, in your town, please, find out about Reed's customer and go out and come park and as you walk the cemetery, you place those wreaths. Take a look at the name. And think of the story that's below your feet that was never fully told.
Well, technically, the way to do that is to address the, place the wreath and then take a step or two back,
Yeah.
say the name and salute.
Yeah, that's.
The Georgetown ceremony is 11 o'clock, Saturday, the 17th at Harmony Cemetery is where we begin. We have other places to put them, Union Cemetery and the Old Michael Parish Church Cemetery.
Now, Arlington National Cemetery, they're doing it this Saturday also.
Yes,
And
that Saturday is America, Wreaths Across America Day. Yeah.
so I think they're doing it 11.
Something.
So anyways, something to think about. That's my chairman's comments, and moving on.
You gonna mention the
I'm sorry.
Veterans Breakfast last time?
Oh, yes. How could I forget food? All things. Veteran breakfast, very nice. It was a good time. It was, it's always good. It's a little bit smaller this year than it was in past years. It was at the First Church. And also there was a veteran breakfast in Raleigh. I imagine the other towns even have veterans breakfasts. And they're always nice to get together, and sometimes you get to sit with somebody who's in a war or someplace that the person is very humble and everything else. I think I told you the story about sitting beside a vet back probably we had veterans dinner, and it was back about 8 years ago. And as I turned to veteran, he was in his 80s, at this particular World War II veteran. And he looked at me and said, "Wow," he said, "I didn't do much in the war." And I said, "Oh, you did? What'd you do?" He said, "I was in the Navy and I sat in the back of, you know what an SDD is?" I'm like, "You were a dive bomber?" And he went, "Yeah, but I didn't do much." Well, he started telling me his story. I was just like, my mouth dropped. He was on the Eastern Sullivan's campaign. In 1942, he was on the USS Saratoga. He saw the USS Enterprise get hit, struck by a bomb. And then the whole time he said, "I didn't do much." And I knew he was telling the truth because he said, "I looked to my left. And if he was about to take off on the Saratoga, the Enterprise was on the starboard side." So he told us the story was like fabricated. And I went, "Wow." And he just went on like that. And he was very humble. So it's very interesting. So with that, anything else, Linda?
No.
Okay, moving on. Number 7, report on military officers' ability to receive veterans preferences Linda.
So at the last meeting, I brought up that I had learned about officers who retire out of the service after, 20, 25, 30 years and might want to apply at a federal agency, NOAA or the FBI, or they get no veterans preference unless they're disabled. And I sort of had a few questions about that. It didn't sit well with me because I just felt that anybody that served that kind of time, or any time really, should be given preference for hiring. So I reached out to Congressman Moulton's office, thanks to Karen, and I spoke with Steve Bone there, who sent me the law about it, and sure enough, that's exactly right. Unless you have a disability, a lot of these, if you retire at the rank of major or above, you would not be eligible for any kind of hiring veterans preference. So he then turned me over to their office's Department of Defense liaison, Canvas, who did some research, and she pretty much confirmed that. But she also told me that there was a law, some legislation presented a year ago, which has not been acted upon yet, that would, I'll read it very brief. This bill modifies the eligibility criteria for certain veterans to qualify for preference in the federal hiring process. Specifically, an individual who is honorably discharged from active duty is eligible for a veteran's preference if the active duty service was performed for more than 180 days. Currently, it says consecutive days. This would be 180 days overall. Additionally, a retired member of the armed forces is eligible for a veteran's preference, even if the retiree, number one, is not a disabled veteran, and number two, retired at or above the rank of major or its equivalent. So this is sitting in a committee somewhere at the federal level. So
What was the rationale? Like, did they have a rationale why the law was written not? I was just curious what the rationale
I
was.
don't know. It may have something to do with some of the research that Candace provided says when the Dual Compensation Act was under consideration, there was extensive debate in Congress as to who should be entitled to preference. And Congress basically compromised by giving preference in appointment to most retired military members, except for high-ranking officers, right? So, and it goes on. So I told my son about it because, as I told you all last meeting, he's considering retiring probably next year, and his current rank is major. And he was very impressed with the research that they sent me, but he kind of chuckled and said, if I were to retire right now at my major pay in today's economy, that's not very much money. So anyway, so Candace's last day as the DOD liaison was yesterday. So I sent another email back to Steve, thanking him for this information, thanking them for this information, but also asking where this sat at that level and whether Congressman Moulton supports it. Because I did not see his name on the list of supporting. So more to follow.
Okay, thank you for your due diligence there.
Times government doesn't understand. It's something, a lot of it,
We like,
you know, there's,
like study.
just because you're a light bird and above, doesn't mean that you're not susceptible to the same dangers as
Yeah.
anybody else.
Right, and people, I mean, you all know, people that have been in for that length of time, have given considerable, have given up their, a lot of their personal lives to the service. And if they're looking to start a new career when they get out.
It's a difficult life, because you spend 2 or 3 years here, or you may spend 4 years here. And especially if you're in the Navy, I was looking at, if you were a 30-year veteran in the Navy, you probably spent something, I was this percentage, something like 14 years at sea. I mean, and that's away from your family and everything else, but it's the same thing with in the army and everything else. If you were deployed on the DMC in Korea or
Well, just the last 20 years of my life was a year and 15 months away from my family at a time. So
Yeah.
I had 6 years away from my family, a year, 15 months, a year, a year, a year.
so
And that's just OEF and OIF. That is nothing prior to that. So yeah, I mean, all the services do that. And you gotta remember though, they changed the law where you could no longer, you didn't get penalized for retiring or leaving the military and going to government services as a retiree and double dipping. So they got rid of all that. What tends to happen with senior officers is they retire in the areas, they take their last assignments in the areas where they're gonna retire. The
Right.
DC area, where they, when you work for an agency, Defense Logistics Agency, you work at the Pentagon, you work whatever, you migrate back into that life, taking off the uniform and going into the civilian sector, you kind of set yourself up. Same thing with that, the major installations. You'll go and work for TRADOC, CASCOM, any one of the major agencies, whether you're Army, or it doesn't matter your service. That's how it really works. The preferences, the percentages, it means absolutely nothing. My disability means nothing if I want a federal job. It's who you know, and it's how you fill everything out getting into those agencies. Because you still go through the same hiring process. They still have panels. And it's not a very easy process. It really is not. If you don't know the people that are in the panels and you don't know the organizations, you're never gonna get into those
like,
organizations.
your military occupational specialty too.
Well, yeah, I mean, you try to stay in that world. It's a tough world to get yourself into. You're exactly 100% right in the preferences. And even if you do have the preferences, you have your disability, Purple Heart, it doesn't matter. It's a couple of points and it means absolutely nothing at the
You
end
were
of
a
the day.
tanker, weren't you?
No.
Oh, okay.
But it just doesn't hold any weight regardless of what they give for points. You know what I mean? And just like the spouses preferences. They say they're there, they are there, but they're really not there. When your spouse goes to go for a job, it's just not there. It's tough. I feel for your son when he goes that route
Well, this
with that
was,
preference.
this new legislation that's kind of in
But the
limbo,
thing-
that was filed long before I even found out
It
about
is,
it.
but again, it's federal jobs are very hard. Just the application process in US, you have to go on USA Jobs, and that filling out all those documents is absolutely horrific. It's a very arduous, difficult process.
Oh, I have no
It's
doubt.
really
My point in all of this is if they're gonna give it up to the rank of captain, they
But-
should give it to everybody.
Yeah, I mean, for all those, I never heard of a rank ever. And I was on many hiring panels while I was on active duty for for the DOD.
Yeah.
And rank meant absolutely zero in those panels. They can't. They meant absolutely,
It's actually, I think it's very hard to retire as a captain. I personally don't know anybody that spent 20 years as an officer in the military that wasn't at least field grade something.
Yeah.
So what they're doing is they've eliminated everybody. If they're talking about retirees, officers,
Right.
they've eliminated everybody.
All right,
So.
anything else? More to follow. Okay, now, number 8, director's report. Aaron, you've been silent over here.
Well, so I'd like you to. So anyways, I guess I'll start off with, the bridge ceremony. I'm really happy with the way that it came out. I think that, we had something like 200 people.
More than that.
I
I was so impressed. It was phenomenal. You did a phenomenal job. that was over the top.
Yeah, it's,
That was very well done.
yeah, and I mean, and I'm not gonna read it or anything, but because I'll probably get too emotional. But I got a really nice email from the Gold Star family that was like, because people were like, oh, did you get any good feedback? And you know, what were people saying? And I'm like, you know what, after I got that email from the Gold Star family, I said, it doesn't even matter. Nobody else could have showed up. You know what I mean? And like that, I don't care what anybody says. What you say doesn't even matter. But yeah, the Gold Star family, you know, thank me and Rich for our kindness. And also, you know, was just saying how everybody, you know, that went up to them, how respectful and, you know, how they, you know, and the Gold Star family was thanking us for honoring, you know, their son and others like them and stuff like that. And so yeah, so it was really, it was a long time coming. It was worth every minute, every minute that we spent on it. So yeah, and if any of you guys have any comments or questions on it. So, okay, so if you can pull out my colorful chart, I wanted to go over this because this is something else that I'm very excited about. So once a year, we get a snapshot of who's on benefits that year, that month from the VA, and so the VSOs get it. So this is a 1 month. So this tells you how many people are on benefits, on what benefits, and it goes by town. So for instance, in how much money, how much compensation they're getting. So all this money is tax-free money coming into the towns and stuff. But so for just service-connected disability and within the district, we have 474. And then we have the veterans pension, which is for low-income veterans. DIC is for dependents, and so that's for people, their spouse was 100% service-connected disability and died because of that disability. And death pension is for surviving spouses that are low income. All right, so I mean, these numbers are like staggering, but for an individual who's receiving compensation, the average monthly that they're receiving is $1,235. And so, I mean, what that means for an individual is huge. But one thing that I really would like to point out more than anything else, so the national average of veterans who have a service-connected disability is 19.5. In our district, we're above that. I mean, in Georgetown, we're at 29%. So that means that 29% of the veterans in Georgetown are service-connected through the VA. That's all I wanted to say. I mean, I looked at this like 100 times and I'm just like, I mean, Newberry, it's 25%. So the district as a whole, the average is 26% of all the veterans within the district have a service-connected disability and is receiving compensation for it. It is a very high number.
Because you're a rock star.
No, that's not the, so I do want to put the caveat out there that, you know, it's not to say that I did every single one of these plans because I didn't, but the office is busy and, you know, it's important that there's VSOs in the communities because in a lot of other states, because to do a VA claim is like so hard and convoluted and they just set you up for failure because you can't look on the website and know all the documents that are going to be required. Like they just don't put it out there. It's definitely not easy. And that also goes, and so I go through training all year long. That was another thing I was gonna mention is that both Karen and I mean, they had VSO training, you know, for 4 days and the lovely town of Leominster. Where we just get hammered
And it
with,
starts at 9 and it ends at 5. It's not,
yeah. And everything is just, you get hammered with all like, all this training all day,
feed you
and-
at your table. You know?
Yeah. And so, you know, and then we have, other, you know, part of the Northeast MVSOA and the, you know, MVSOA, so the North Shore Veterans Collaborative, the Merrimack Veterans Collaborative. And so, you know, I do a lot of networking, I do a lot of training. I'm on like vision committees for, you know, for the Northeast and, Merrimack Valley. So it takes a lot of training to be able to do this, and the fact that, you know, we're just so above. I was actually disappointed in myself. I'm like, oh, Essex only has 21%, but that's because I'm looking compared to the other ones, and I'm like, wait a second, 21% is still over what the national average is, you know? So it's like, yeah, stop being so hard on yourself too. But yeah, so you can take these away so that way you can kind of digest the numbers, but the big takeaway, I think, is that percentage of people within the community that are receiving VA compensation.
So the all awards column, that's the total of these.
That's correct.
I have a question.
Sure.
When you get off of active duty or, you know, you get out of the military and you're filling out because I've done it, I fill the forms out. If you put on when do you get disabled? When is that attached to you? I mean, is it the day that you get off of active duty, or is there?
The day, when you put the paperwork in, okay, for disability, it starts when the paperwork goes in. That first day that paperwork goes in, that's when it starts.
Well,
That's when the process
But-
starts. It
Yeah,
doesn't
right.
become.
That's what I'm asking.
But you gotta remember too, when you retire, you still have a minimum of 6 months before you can even start to be rated for your disability. So you get, remember, you get your medical records are certified. They take the certified medical records, you sit down with your DAV, if you're lucky enough to have somebody like Karen, a real VSO, or if you're at a military installation, you have DABs, or you have one of the organizations, they get paid based on the number of that they submit. Doesn't matter quality, doesn't matter if they get it for you or whatever. And they take that, they fill out the documentation based on what your medical records say your injuries are. And then you fill all of that documentation out, that's then taken, and then that is submitted officially to the Veterans Affairs. And the Veterans Affairs, they initially will stamp it. They'll send the certified copy back to that DAB or whoever you got a process saying your paperwork is now being reviewed. And then when they review it, then you'll get your phone call notification to go to your medical appointments. Then you'll go to your medical appointments. They'll have everything in front of them. They'll give their feedback. Then we'll go back to the VA. And then the VA will then, the individual is looking at it, whether it's really a VA or a third party. And they will start giving you your percentages based on what the doctors and the documentation says. Then it's all said and done. And there's your rating, and then you get your final approval on it. But I mean, you remember, it's not based upon, it's not 1% for 1%. To be 100%, you have to be 260% disabled
Right, no,
before you
yeah,
can get to 100%.
I guess my question, this is a personal question for
When
me,
it
it's
all-
like, so for example, if my medical records showed that I had a 30% hearing loss over a 20-year period, that doesn't
it's
mean
irrelevant. It's
anything.
irrelevant
No,
what's the record. It's irrelevant what the records say. It's what that rating comes back from the individuals after the doctor has finished their piece
Gotcha.
and gave their numbers, and then they're finally doing that review and they're tallying it up on, and then they say, here it is. You're 60%, you're 70%, and then like every year, if you want to get that upgraded, you'll have to fill out the documentation again and try to keep getting it upgraded as the years go on. I hope I just, I lived this process, and it is the most painful, and I wasn't fortunate to have somebody like Karen that would help me with mine. It was the most arduous, painful thing I did after retirement. I could not imagine it. It was horrific. And your rank means 0, 0, 0. Means nothing.
When I got it, I put in for Kopichar, okay? And so I called the VA and they, very first thing they asked me, you know, when we discharged all this. And I told them, and then I said, by the way, I was at Camp Lejeune, the waterfall. I was there for 10 months. And they went, well, do you have proof? Well, I'm a pack rat. I kept all my transfers, my orders when I was in the Marines. And I took it and I faxed it at 3:45 on a Thursday. And I was going to church on, called it 8:45 on Bedford. And they said, you're in the program because of all it works. Throw anything away. Because on my discharge, all it shows is my last duty station on my DD. It doesn't show, usually a lot of DD 214s will show where you have been. It only showed my last duty station. So that was it. They didn't show Camp Lejeune for the time I was down there. So
Doesn't the military keep records of that though? I mean, you knew you were there.
It changed so much, and then until they finally got where hospitals could talk to each other and services could talk to each other, it wasn't until
I